Mythology loves opposites, light and shadow, order and corruption, creation and what comes after it breaks. Some legendary creatures weren't meant to have darker forms, yet mythology gave them one anyway. Same power, same origin, completely different fate. Are you familiar with these beings? Not all supernatural beings are born good or evil. Some simply decide how they will treat you. The Seelie and Unseelie Fae originate from Scottish folklore, where the word Seelie means fortunate, blessed, or well-disposed, and Unseelie means ill-omened or unlucky. They are not two different species. They are two dispositions of the same race, the fair folk. This matters because neither side was ever harmless. The Seelie Fae were known to interact with humans under strict, invisible rules. Show respect, hospitality, and restraint, and you might be rewarded. Break etiquette, insult them or ignore their customs, and punishment was swift and merciless. The Unseelie Fae were far more direct. They appeared at night. They attacked travelers. They spread sickness, misfortune, and sudden death. Unlike the Seelie, they offered no bargains and expected no gratitude. If you encountered them, survival was never part of the agreement. Here's the crucial distinction most modern retellings get wrong. Seelie and Unseelie are not opposing factions at war. They are not good versus evil. They are the same supernatural nature expressed differently. A Seelie Fae could still kill if offended. An Unseelie Fae was not cruel out of malice, but out of temperament. To meet the Seelie was only a blessing if you followed their rules. To meet the Unseelie was almost always fatal. Together, they represent a single supernatural race divided not by origin, but by alignment. And as this list continues, that same division will appear again, not among spirits of forest and hill, but among beings born of divinity itself. The unicorn and the bicorn both emerge from medieval European bestiaries, texts that treated these creatures not as fantasy, but as symbolic beings believed to exist in the natural world. To medieval scholars, these were not imaginary animals. They were moral truths given form. The unicorn was described as a horse or goat-like creature bearing a single straight horn. It embodied purity, restraint, and divine order. It could not be captured by force. Only calmness, innocence, or humility could approach it. But in the same tradition, another creature appeared, the bicorn. Far less famous, but deliberately placed. The bicorn was depicted as a violent, aggressive beast with two curved horns. Where the unicorn avoided conflict, the bicorn charged toward it. Where the unicorn symbolized restraint, the bicorn represented excess, rage, disorder, and moral fracture. This wasn't coincidence. Medieval thinkers did not invent the bicorn as a separate species. They created it as a mirror. One horn versus two was never cosmetic. It was symbolic. One horn meant unity, focus, singular purpose. Two horns meant division, opposition, internal conflict. The unicorn represented a will aligned in one direction. The bicorn represented a will split against itself. And that idea that every ideal casts a shadow doesn't end with beasts of the earth. Because the next creatures don't just fracture virtue. They are born,
die, and rise again, with corruption written into the cycle itself. Immortality isn't the problem. What matters is what you do with it. The phoenix originates in ancient Egyptian belief, later reshaped by Greek and Roman writers. In Egypt, it appears as the Bennu, a sacred solar bird tied to creation, renewal, and the rhythm of time itself. This is not an immortal creature that avoids death. It embraces it. When its lifespan ends, the phoenix burns willingly and is reborn from its own ashes, unchanged, uncorrupted, and complete. But in Arabic and Islamic folklore, this same archetype takes a darker turn. The Anka is a colossal, awe-inspiring bird created by God, described in medieval cosmological and moral texts. Like the phoenix, it possesses immense longevity and supernatural origin. At first, it fulfills its purpose. But unlike the phoenix, the Anka does not renew, it decays. Islamic tradition tells that the Anka eventually becomes harmful. It preys upon humans, disrupts divine order, or exceeds its intended role. Its immortality does not fail because of weakness or age, but because of moral corruption. And for that reason, the Anka is erased, not slain by heroes, not reborn, simply removed from existence by divine will. Linguistically and culturally, the Anka is often identified as the Arabic equivalent of the phoenix. In modern Standard Arabic, Anka is the direct translation of phoenix. Both birds are associated with Mount Kaf, the legendary mountain at the edge of the world. On the surface, they appear to be the same creature, but mythology treats them as two outcomes of the same idea. Both are born of fire, both are divine, both are immortal, yet only one survives eternity. The phoenix remains pure because it submits to renewal. The Anka falls because it refuses restraint and got corrupted. And this pattern will continue, because as we descend further into myth, we'll see beings whose power is vast, whose lifespan is endless, yet whose fall is written into their very nature. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe. And now, on to the next one. At first glance, the Sphinx appears unchanged across cultures. A lion's body, a human face, immense power frozen in stone. But mythology tells a very different story. The Egyptian Sphinx is among the oldest symbols of sacred authority in human history. Dating back to the Old Kingdom, it represents divine kingship, cosmic order, and protection. With the body of a lion, the ultimate symbol of strength, and the face of a pharaoh, the Sphinx embodies harmony between power and wisdom. It does not threaten, it does not judge, it watches. But when the Sphinx crosses cultures, something breaks. In Greek mythology, the Sphinx becomes something far more dangerous. The Greek Sphinx is no guardian. She is an executioner. Sent as a curse upon the city of Thebes, this Sphinx perches above the road and forces travelers to answer a riddle. Those who fail are killed, devoured without mercy. Her power no longer protects order, it tests worth. Intelligence becomes a weapon, authority becomes conditional. Survival is no longer guaranteed by innocence or obedience, but by mental superiority. This transformation is crucial. The Egyptian Sphinx represents power that exists to preserve balance. The Greek Sphinx represents power that demands recognition. And when Oedipus finally answers her riddle, she does not adapt, she does not accept challenge. Her identity is built entirely on being unbeatable. When that illusion shatters, she throws herself from her high place and dies, not slain, invalidated. This is the moment purity collapses. The Sphinx did not lose strength, she lost meaning. What was once a symbol of eternal order becomes a creature that cannot survive contradiction. The guardian becomes the judge becomes the tyrant, and the tyrant cannot exist once questioned. Dragons exist in almost every culture, but they do not mean the same thing. In East Asian mythology, the dragon is among the most revered beings in existence. Known as Long in China, Ryu in Japan, and Yang in Korea, these dragons are not monsters to be slain, but cosmic forces that sustain life. They are long, serpentine, and wingless, often associated with clouds, rivers, rainfall, and the movement of the heavens. This is power aligned with order. But as the dragon moves west, something changes. In Western mythology, the dragon becomes an enemy. European dragons are massive, winged, fire-breathing beasts tied to ruin, greed, and desolation. They dwell in caves and wastelands, guarding hordes of stolen treasure. Towns burn, heroes die, and entire regions fall into decay simply because a dragon has claimed the land. Unlike their Eastern counterparts, Western dragons do not regulate nature, they defy it. Their defining trait is not wisdom, but possession. From Fafnir and Nidhogg in Norse myth to the dragon slain by St. George, Western dragons embody corruption through hoarding. They collect gold they cannot use, wealth that offers no survival advantage, and treasure that becomes an extension of their identity. The dragon does not protect balance, it interrupts it. Life recedes wherever it settles. Where Eastern dragons represent harmony between humanity and the cosmos, Western dragons represent what happens when power turns inward, clings, and refuses to let go. Saint Nicholas originates from a real historical figure, Nicholas of Myra, a 4th century Christian bishop in what is now modern Turkey. He became revered across Europe for charity, protection of children, and anonymous gift-giving. Over time, he evolved into a symbolic judge of behavior, rewarding virtue, obedience, and moral discipline rather than indulgence. In medieval tradition, Saint Nicholas was not just generous, he observed, he evaluated. During feast days, children were taught that good conduct led to blessing, while bad behavior would not go unnoticed. Mercy existed, but it was conditional. His role was to reinforce moral order through reward. Krampus represents the other half of that system. Emerging from Alpine folklore in regions like Austria and Bavaria, Krampus is depicted as a horned, beast-like figure armed with chains or birch rods. He appears during the same season as Saint Nicholas, but he does not reward, he punishes. Misbehaving children are frightened, beaten, or in darker traditions, carried away entirely. Krampus does not act independently. He is a companion, not a rival. Scholars widely agree he reflects pre-Christian pagan imagery absorbed into Christian customs rather than created by them. Where Saint Nicholas teaches through blessing, Krampus teaches through fear. This pairing reflects an ancient mythological truth. Morality is rarely enforced by kindness alone. Fear has always walked beside virtue. But as this list continues, we leave behind human judgment, saints, spirits, and seasonal rituals, and move towards something far older. Creatures whose purity and corruption are not choices, but built into their very nature. In ancient myth, the hero and the villain are not separate kinds of beings. They are the same archetype, split by outcome. Heroes were never defined by purity or kindness. They were defined by power, divine blood, divine favor, or an inescapable fate. Achilles, Heracles, Gilgamesh, each was capable of saving civilizations and leveling them. These figures were chosen, marked, or created to impose change, and so were the villains. Mythological villains are rarely weak or corrupt from birth. They are kings, champions, demigods, and gods, beings with the same strength, agency, and potential as heroes. The difference is not what they are, it's where they stand when power is tested. In myth, the line between hero and villain is drawn by alignment, not morality. A hero succeeds by acting in accordance with fate, divine will, or cosmic law, even when the act is brutal. A villain fails by crossing a boundary, seeking immortality, vengeance, or dominion beyond what the gods allow. Greek myth makes this brutally clear. Hubris doesn't weaken champions, it reclassifies them. The same strength that allows Perseus to save kingdoms is the strength that condemns figures like Lycaon or Pentheus when turned against divine order. They are not opposites, they are reflections. This is why mythology doesn't treat heroes and villains as moral binaries. It treats them as warnings. Both emerge from extraordinary power under extraordinary pressure. One becomes a protector of culture. The other becomes a necessary adversary, a living reminder that power has limits. And as this list continues, you'll notice something unsettling. This pattern doesn't end with mortals. Because when the hero-villain divide appears among gods themselves, the consequences no longer shape kingdoms, they rewrite worlds.
They're often called good and evil. Light elves, dark elves. But Norse mythology never divided them that way. The division between light elves and dark elves comes from Norse mythology, most clearly recorded in the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. But here's the key detail most people miss. This split was never about morality. It was about where power belonged in the structure of the cosmos. The light elves, called Ljósálfar, dwell in Alfheim, a realm associated with brightness, beauty, and the upper worlds. They are described as fairer than the sun, radiant beings tied to fertility, prosperity, and cosmic order. While the myths don't spell out their behavior in detail, they are consistently positioned close to the gods, aligned with visibility, harmony, and the life-giving forces of the universe. But then, there are the dark elves. Known as Dagálfar, they dwell underground, described as darker than pitch. Not corrupted, not monstrous, just hidden. They are associated with the earth, deep places, and the unseen mechanisms that shape reality from below. Dark elves represent secrecy, craftsmanship, and forces that operate away from light and recognition. Here's where the misunderstanding begins. Norse sources do not portray dark elves as evil. They are different, not fallen. Light elves and dark elves are not separate species. They are two expressions of the same type of being, divided by realm and function, not virtue. One operates in the open, the other works beneath the surface. Together, they reflect how Norse cosmology views existence itself, not as good versus evil, but as layered realities stacked one upon another. They weren't born enemies. They weren't even different beings. The Devas and the Asuras were once the same. The Deva and Asura originate in ancient Indian religious tradition,
appearing in the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, and later Hindu and Buddhist texts. In the earliest Vedic sources, the term asura did not mean demon. It referred to powerful divine beings, often associated with sovereignty and cosmic order. Likewise, Deva simply meant shining one, a class of celestial beings tied to natural forces such as fire, storm, and the sky. At this stage, the Devas and Asuras belonged to the same divine category, frequently overlapping in function and status. Over time, particularly in later Vedic and Puranic literature, a moral divergence emerged. The Devas became associated with cosmic order, Rita, and later Dharma, sacrifice and balance, ruling the heavens under Indra and later Vishnu's protection. The Asuras, meanwhile, came to represent beings driven by power, ambition, and defiance of cosmic law. Importantly, they were not embodiments of absolute evil. Many Asuras are depicted as intelligent, disciplined, and spiritually capable, often gaining power through intense austerities. Their conflict with the Devas reflects a struggle over authority and order, not a war between good and evil. In mythology, the Deva-Asura divide represents a single divine race split by alignment rather than origin. Both groups are born from the same primordial sources and possess comparable powers, immortality, and cosmic significance. What separates them is not creation, but adherence to cosmic balance versus domination through force. This duality expresses a central theme of Indian mythology. Power without restraint leads to downfall, while harmony with cosmic law sustains existence. And as this list reaches its peak, this pattern will appear one final time among beings whose fall reshaped the very structure of heaven itself.
They weren't created as monsters. They weren't even meant to choose. But when angels fell, heaven itself fractured. Angels originate in Abrahamic tradition, appearing across Hebrew scripture, Christian theology, and later Islamic interpretation. Their name comes from malach, messenger. Angels were not designed as independent beings with personal ambition. They were created as extensions of divine order, embodiments of obedience, function, and cosmic hierarchy. At their highest level, angels were not gentle figures with wings. They were terrifying forces of authority. Seraphim burned with divine presence. Cherubim guarded sacred boundaries. Thrones upheld the structure of heaven itself. Angels did not question, they executed will. But that perfection carried a flaw. According to theological and apocryphal traditions, especially texts like the Book of Enoch, some angels became self-aware of their own power. The Watchers descended to earth, driven by desire, curiosity, or defiance. Others, led by Lucifer, rejected subservience entirely. Their sin was not violence, it was choice. Lucifer, whose name means light-bringer or morning star, was not cast down for hatred, but for pride. He did not want to destroy God's order, he wanted to rival it. This mirrors a recurring mythic pattern. Beings born closest to perfection fall hardest when they elevate themselves above the system that sustains them. When angels fall, they do not become lesser creatures, they become inverted ones. Fallen angels retain intelligence, memory, and power, but stripped of harmony. What was once purpose becomes obsession. What was once authority becomes manipulation. Devils are not chaotic beasts. They are former executors of order who now weaponize knowledge against it. This is what makes fallen angels unique. They are not corrupted by hunger, envy, or wrath alone. They are corrupted
by knowing exactly what they lost. Like the Asuras, they are not born evil. Like the Devas, they are divine in origin. But unlike both, fallen angels represent something far more dangerous: order that understands itself and chooses rebellion anyway.